Realization of truth is free of all subjectivity, all knowledge, and all experience. Section 2:17 from The Paradox of Instruction by Bubba Free John, known now as Adidas Samraj. All meaning is implication. Something is meaningful when it implies something else, when it stands for something, when it stands out in consciousness, distracting the consciousness from its own condition of enjoyment. True liberation involves freedom from all implication and, therefore, from the whole force of meaning, the power of living dreams, the power of worlds and experiences. When the power of meaning or implication is sacrificed or comprehended in the consciousness, then the creative position fails at its root. Where there is no meaning, no force of implication, the consciousness rests in its own realm, no longer making the dream of self and world. Then the only destiny is the uncreated, the seedless realm, which may not be described, since it has no relation to any gross or heavenly realm that any being, great or small, has ever known. My devotee is the inheritor of this destiny and this sacrifice. 2:18. Meaning is the function of mind. It does not inhere in things themselves, nor in consciousness or awareness itself. Where there is simple, direct awareness of something, there is no meaning. The worlds are without meaning. Just so, consciousness and every body are without meaning. We are free of meaning and of knowledge. This freedom is ignorance. Meaning appears only when something arising is compared, found to be like something in past experiences. The usual man lives in an unreal world of meanings and the absence of meanings. He is aware of little directly, but perceives all arising relative to meaning. Meaning is an unnecessary, secondary, artificial, and ultimately binding attribution of what arises. To be free of it, we must be free of mind. For this reason, much of the advice given by the teachers of men is about the overcoming of mind, or the function of meaning, of comparison, of chronic remembering, so that awareness may be pure, direct. In that case, reality rather than meaning becomes the content of awareness. This, however, is not the end of it. Awareness is itself a limitation prior to meaning. It is analyzed by identification with specific bodily or mind-body presence in the midst of environments. Thus, the ego soul or separate and separative principle precedes mind. This principle must be obviated through direct, pre-mental recognition of all conditions, and simultaneous radical intuition of the condition of all conditions, elemental, etheric, mental, transcendental, egoic. Then the dream, the dreaming, and the dreamer fall in the heart, the divine. Such is perfect ignorance or happiness beyond body, speech, or realm. The way of divine communion is the foundation and essence of this realization. It involves that reception and falling into the beloved in which no self survives. The presence is prior to all meaning. To enjoy the communication of this presence is to be free of mind, of self, and of all the tormented or illusory visions made on the basis of this body-mind in which we seem to move. But we do not move in any shape or knowledge. We are moved, lived and breathed in the single reality, the unqualified divine, which is gracefully revealed to us as presence as we begin to awaken. 2:19. What is it that you mean, that you are signifying and pointing to, when you say or feel you are suffering, unhappy, not at ease? You are pointing to your own action and finding it as the experience of separation, contraction, pain. But it is the compulsive and presently not conscious avoidance of relationship relative to the divine presence and relative to all arising conditions. When this action becomes your responsibility, then these experiences and concerns will become obsolete by degrees in the action of God communion, and then in the intuition of your true condition. 2:20. Mind has two aspects or points of view: experience and abstraction. The experience point of view is never summary or conclusive, but sees the world as a limitless source of even random possibilities, all of which actually appear in the form of experience at the right time, coincident with one's tendencies. From this point of view, the world is a dimensionless realm or process, as fluid and indefinite as the dream state. The abstraction point of view sees everything formally, in summary, discretely. Thus, the world is viewed as a specific form or limitation. It is the earth, etc. Everything is conceived and experience serves conception. The function of the abstract mind is to define what has already been known or experienced, so that it may be controlled or rationally met, and so that it may be set apart from what is not yet known or experienced. One can consider leaving the world only when it has become a definite place rather than an indefinite realm. The function of the experiential mind is to know directly what arises. When the world is known directly, then one can abstract oneself. Thus, the play between these two functions produces the traditional convention of liberation. However, the mind in both its forms must be undone if there is to be realization in truth. When confinement to what arises as well as the search to escape or transcend what arises no longer distract, then only God becomes the condition and the enjoyment. 2:21. Conventional meditation is inwardness, or remedy by subjectivity. Real meditation, the meditation of devotees in the way of divine ignorance, is a process of awakening from subjectivity. The process is gradual in its perfection, but its truth is certain from the beginning. The inner I is not the result in this way. I am not the body is not the point of view of practice. The endless distraction of subjectivity, of contraction, is considered and undermined through various kinds of participation during the four great stages of practice. The truth is not the view, I am the body. However, this is factually true of I, and therefore our practice must centre on relationship and release from the reflex of contraction, rather than on conventional and exclusive inward turning. Real meditation must centre on insight into the avoidance of relationship and every form of contraction or reactive reflex, rather than the search for subjective fulfillments and all the glamorous illusions of experience. Thus, the samadhi or perfect intuition of the real condition in which our real meditation is resolved at last is utterly free of subjectivity, of knowledge, of thought, of self, of perception, of sound, of light, of vacant silence, of action, of experience, of a limitation. The realization which comes to maturity in the way of radical intuition is free of subjectivity, or the reflexive gesture of inwardness, as well as all the complications of objective relationship, or the gesture of outwardness. It is radiant, not contracted. It is not inwardness, nor is it compulsively motivated by any object. It is ignorance, or liberation in real God, prior to the limitations introduced by subject or object, and all the habitual adaptations founded in the dilemma or dream of subject-object dream realms. 2.22. Obsessive thinking is a disturbance to the brain, as reactive emotions are to the heart's breath, and conventional orgasm is to the navel. The brain must become still, and most intense or bright, as must the middle and lower regions of the body being. Radiance or prior fullness must precede and replace the chronic contractions that are constant thought, reactive emotion, and vital discharge, not only through conventional orgasm, but through all forms of enervating self-indulgence. This is possible only in radical resort to the native disposition of ignorance, which is prior to the knowledge that is birth and experience and death. The way of divine ignorance is the realization of freedom from the curse of subjectivity and the illusion of all objects. 2.23. I is not inside and or exclusive of the body-mind. It is identical to the whole open-ended, ultimately unknown body-mind. However, the truth or condition of I, the truth of the sense of separate and independent existence, as well as of body-mind, is not any limitation. All of this, including all worlds or objects, gross, subtle, causal, transcendental, is only modification of the non-contracted, non-contradicted, unfathomable, timeless, spaceless reality, infinitely pervading all arising, and yet utterly without reference to any arising. Thus, I is the body-mind. It is not within the body-mind, but the condition of the body-mind is without limitation of body, mind, self, or any other kind of differentiation, high or low. That condition is not merely the droning, snuffed out undercurrent of this world. It is the very divine. It is radiant consciousness. It is bliss. 2.24. I is the body itself. I is not the condition or truth of the body, but is itself the whole body, the condition or limitation itself. The truth or condition of the body or I is that of which I or the body is the present modification or condition. This condition or truth is tacitly realized in ignorance, the absence of any accounting for any and all arising, the absence of any necessity or implication in any or all arising. Neither any world, high or low, nor the body, nor I is happiness. These are all the same condition, the arising of unnecessary limitation. These are only modifications of prior happiness, freedom, or bliss. This is tacitly clear in ignorance of all arising. In ignorance, all modification is recognized as such and ceases to be necessary and binding. Thus, all arising ceases to require or motivate a point of view. All dilemma and effort a survivor. In ignorance, all conditions are spontaneously abandoned via recognition of their non-necessity and thorough rest or abiding in their cognitive condition. Excuse me. Therefore, in ignorance, all arising, every world, high or low, the body, all its relations, the I itself, is spontaneously released. All such things, all arising, cease to concern and bind. There is simply abiding in the prior, unknown, not cognized, non-mysterious, wonderful, and unspeakable condition of the presently arising conditions. This abiding is not in conflict with any arising. It is at rest, free of fitful programs of life, ordinary in every moment, at ease, disposed to fulfill what is essentially given, not complicated by any requirement or design of preferred destiny. I am not realized, saved, or released. I is simply obsolete with all arising. The stroke rests. There is only paradox. The dream is not upheld. Only the body I makes philosophy in worlds. In ignorance, all of that is undermined. The mind has no necessity. Silence persists. I, all thoughts, reactions, the body, all worlds cease to motivate, bind, and persist. The happiness is not spoken. The heart does not walk and talk. 2:25. The body sense yields to the reaction of the identification of consciousness as limitation. I, or me, as independent body-mind, or body-mind self. Spiritual realization is simply the obviation of this reaction and all its implications. I is the body, but also the mind, and the separate or independent self-sense. These are a single, simultaneous, reflexive assumption based on the experience of independent bodily or born condition. But when, through the conscious process in radical understanding, the way of ignorance, these are all realized, along with all other arising conditions, subjective, objective, gross, subtle, causal, and transcendental, to be only modification of the prior condition of the sense of independent or separate existence. I, me. They become unnecessary, a matter of humour. Then there is simple abiding in natural sahaj and perfect bhava, intuition of the real condition, the divine. 2:26. The divine is one, but not in the sense of an object or a subject. That one may not be realized by any concentration of the faculties of being, nor does that one appear as any experience or archetype. When all concentration, contraction, exclusion, separation, union, limitation, experience, knowledge, appearance, perception, form, action, location, cognition, vision, psyche, process, and exclamation cease to define the consciousness, only this one is realized. The divine is paradox, sacrifice, reality, ignorance, unqualified radiance, undefined consciousness, world only, mind only, truth only, no thing, all. No realization realizes this one. Only the obviation and all realization is realization at last. That's with a capital R. 227. The divine is the condition of all conditions, that from which all conditions arise, that of which all conditions are the objectification or modification, that which permeates all conditions, that which is prior to all conditions, that which includes all relations and to which no relations point, since it is not other than prior, that which is not subject or self, since it is absolute but not a part, that from which no living being may be differentiated, except it may seem to be so in the case of delusion by knowledge or experience. We may enjoy communion with the divine via recollection of the presence, by name, by breath, and by service in the way of divine communion, by inquiry in the form avoiding relationship, and maturing in the conductivity of radiance in the way of relational inquiry, by subtle feeling, audition, and sight, and by contemplation of the root of I, in the way of recognition. We realize the divine by graceful dissolution, or sacrifice in Sahaj Samadhi and Bhava Samadhi, in the way of radical intuition. 228. The way of divine ignorance, of which the way of divine communion is the foundation stage, is the way of maturing in happiness, prior to and regardless of whatever conditions are presently arising. In ultimate realization, its ultimate realization involves no dilemma, no strategy, no subjective contraction, no reactive effort, and no search to prevent or change the process of arising itself. It is a radical realization of ignorance to any condition, high or low, that it is apparent. Sorry, I was drifting off there. Not quite sure where I was. Let's start this again. 228. The way of divine ignorance, of which the way of divine communion is the foundation stage, is the way of maturing in happiness, prior to and regardless of whatever conditions are presently arising. Its ultimate realization involves no dilemma, no strategy, no subjective contraction, no reactive effort, and no search to prevent or change the process of arising itself. It is a radical realization of ignorance, radiance, free of subjectivity, which is not identical to any condition, high or low, that is apparent or sought or attained. The process of present arising is spontaneous, uncaused, divine. In the true devotee, it is permitted, by not being prevented, to unfold itself in the eternal theatre of the law. In the ordinary conditions of his or her appearance, the devotee is always, even in maturity, obliged toward fulfillment of the law, which is sacrifice, rather than tendency, which is self-possession. But the truth of the devotee is happiness, or realization of the real condition, whatever the present conditions. In contrast, the conventional ways of mankind represent unenlightened commitment to goals of experience via efforts toward changing conditions, preventing conditions, or the process of arising itself, attaining higher conditions, and all the rest of the drama of ego and object that comes by reaction to birth in apparent limitation. The conventional ways of mankind, or the ways by tendency of every human being, are, simply and irreducibly, forms of reactive seeking, high and low, for changes of state, changes in the conditions of experience, or changes in the way of relating to the conditions of state or experience. The way of divine ignorance, in the form of the disciplines appropriate at each stage, is the way of the realization of the real condition, which is truth, happiness, or the very divine, whatever, if ever anything, presently arises. It does not involve the strategy of passive permission to conditions arising, or passive indulgence of tendencies, nor is it characterized by active and strategic efforts to focus attention or expectation above and beyond the present theatre of conditions arising, or to manipulate the sense and intuition of existence towards some objective or unique transcendental goal, even the goal of the cessation of the process of present arising. Its ordinary discipline is to be disposed to the law, the obligation in relationship, and the present economy of the whole body mind, rather than the fulfillment of random tendencies founded in accumulation or memory and reaction to experience. Its radical discipline is present intuitive rest in the real condition, prior to all subjective contraction and every preference relative to experience. Da. Present happiness, no matter what is arising. No need to change anything. No need to go elsewhere, because happiness is right now. Happiness is always presently the case. Thank you, Lord, for this revelation once more, and for giving us the means to connect up to that present happiness via divine communion.